fundamental of capital growth is your long-term capital growth. And I know it sounds intuitive and also a bit funny saying it that way, but the reason for this is because a lot of people say, past performance doesn't dictate future performance, and basically because of this, because of that, because of something else is a reason why one market goes up, down, or sideways, right? But really, how can you get to an actual, should I say, conclusion if you haven't done any research on a suburb itself? And really, if you want to quantify something or invest in something, the only way to quantify it really and qualify it as well is to look at what's happened in the past, because you're not Marty McFly with a time machine. So it's not as if you know what's going to happen in the future without knowing what happens in the past. So the people who say that are just full of rubbish, really. So, if you think even of value investing, Warren Buffett's philosophy, even his mentor, Benjamin Graham, they always talk about when you're looking to invest in a company, for example, they want a long-term existence or a long-term track record of good performance, but bad performance recently. So you're basically buying a, blue chip asset at a very cheap price. That's what they try to do. So really what they're saying there is you want something that has long-term good capital growth or long-term good performance that you're buying for a, should I say, underpriced value. So that's why this is an important area. Now, what I'm going to get into with this is a suburb called Yarraville in Melbourne. Now, everyone knows it's one of my favorite suburbs. I target this one regularly. I don't know many better suburbs in the country. For me, it's probably a top 10 in the country for sure. But what I've done here is I've just brought out a report here. So it's just your Aussie Home Loans 25-year report. And the reason I brought this out is because it was between 93 and 2018. So it's before a 0.1% interest rate, by which everyone thinks they're an expert, just getting it right in the COVID period. But what I've done here is I've actually highlighted so Melbourne is the best performing capital growth city of Australia, to give you an idea. And this is just the top 20. And you'll see just in the highlights 2, 12, 13, and 2, 12, 13, and then I think it's 16 as well there. They're all in the Maribyrnong Council region there. And if you look at also number 15, that's Spotswood, which actually neighbours Yarraville. If you were to go to the top 100 as well, you'd have West Footscray and Footscray in here as well. So that's multiple. That's like 6 or 7 of them literally within the space of the top 100 suburbs in the country in that period. And that report as well, not all of it was exactly correct, but most of it was. But what I'm showing here is you can see an eventuation to certain areas. So this is the inner west of Melbourne. So, and then Yarraville's, it's literally smack bang in the middle of all these best suburbs. So, you've literally got like Seddon, which neighbours it. You've got also West Footscray, which also neighbours it to the north, and Footscray to the north. Then you've also got Kingsville, which also neighbours it too, and then Spotswood just to the south. So every suburb around it is literally in the top 100 suburbs of the country, and Yarraville smack bang in the middle of it. So if you want an eventuation as to where it's done very well, find out areas that are done well and try to pick the suburbs that are basically in the middle of it, and that is Yarraville. So that's the first fundamental. What is the long-term capital growth of the market? Let's get into the second key fundamental of capital growth, and that is consistently low supply. So obviously everyone would know supply and demand is your most key part of this. I'd argue supply is probably even a little bit more important than demand, because there's certain areas that just consistently have no supply. So even in bad markets, not really much happens to them. That's the reason. With supply as well, I could also say too that, what I'm talking about here is consistently low supply at the moment, consistently low supply of the past, and I also mean consistently low supply in the future. So, that basically eliminates all new estates because they're just rubbish. It eliminates all units because they're also rubbish in terms of supply in that manner. And what low supply always does is, especially if you got the right demand, it naturally will have to push prices up, because prices are more so, capital growth is more so a case of supply and demand more than anything. Now, you'll get idiots that say, no, that's not the case and that kind of thing. But if you've got 10 multi-millionaires bidding for a house that only has, $1 million price point, you're naturally going to know that that's going to go up in value. Now, the key part of supply is obviously who's buying it, but I will get into that in another point later. But a really good example of consistently low supply is just somewhere like Clovelly in Sydney. So Look, in this example here, all I've basically done is gone on realestate.com.au, just searched up houses for sale, and even in that actual highlighted white section, that there's nothing for sale there, and you can see there's literally 3 houses for sale in a whole suburb. So this is a good example of one. I mean, I've done the example of Clovelly a couple of months ago as well, and I think at that time there was only 4 or 5 houses for sale at the time. So this is a good example of a suburb where there's just never anything available for sale. And I mean, longer term, this is really good for capital growth because there's no point where you see much on the market. People hold them for a long time, especially good ones, and that just pushes prices up like crazy because a lot of people want to live there. So what I'll do then is I'll go into point number 3 for capital growth, and that is demand from a wealthy demographic. So where I was saying consistently low supply is a little bit more important is because if it's in the right area, you constantly have demand from a wealthy income demographic. So just in this photo here, you can see this is Canterbury in Melbourne. It's a really good example somewhere where you have very wealthy people often wanting to buy, often wealthy families. No one really sells the right homes there. Like they do come up, like a couple a year will come up, but to get that for the right price is like, I mean, it's like finding Bigfoot. It's like almost impossible to give you an idea. So that's just something to consider. I mean, for looking in a suburb with a wealthy income demographic that also has low supply. But like, what's really key about a wealthy income demographic is that these are the sorts of people that can continue to push prices up. And these are also the people that generally do not have to sell in downtimes. They generally just hold, they're fine, and nothing really goes wrong. So this is just an example here. You'll just see Point Piper is basically Australia's most expensive suburb. 5 houses in the whole year changed hands. So 5 houses in the whole year in Point Piper actually sold. 2 are above 60 million. And that's pretty common in Point Piper. That'll increase year after year after year. But the thing about these suburbs as well that have a wealthy income demographic looking at them, they generally don't have many homes to sell, first of all. But second of all, what happens here is people don't understand how they kind of work because they'll think that it's crushed by 20 or 30% when the market's down. But what's happened is the vast majority of the people just haven't listed their properties, and especially the top end of these markets. So, I mean, Point Piper, you have homes selling from anything between about 10 million right up to 200 or more, right? So the very most expensive ones, they will only sell their homes when, I kid you not, it is somewhere near the very peak of the market, so they can get absolute top dollar for it because they can pretty much just pick whenever they want to sell their home. So that's just another thing about wealthy income demographic looking for a suburb. So that's really important. That's point number 3. Point number 4, access to high-paying jobs. Now, this is important because access to high-paying jobs generally brings a higher income demographic, and it generally brings more demand from the right people. That's the reason it's really important. You can see here just on the overhead here, this is just Kelvin Grove in Brisbane. So it's an inner suburb of Brisbane right next to the hospital precinct and the university precinct as well. It's actually within the university precinct, to be honest. But anyway, that's a good example of somewhere that it has high-paying jobs. The reason it's really important is because generally wealthier people with higher paying jobs, they don't like commuting to work. It's just something they don't do because if you don't have to, why would you? So, I mean, the thing about this is, I mean, most of the better suburbs that have very good jobs that are close by generally have a longer hold period because people generally stay longer. And not only that too, the jobs are good. Everything just works well there. Look, a good example, I'm actually going to go west for this because I've done a lot of the eastern seaboard of this, is a suburb called Duncraig in Perth. So if you just look at this here, this is just basically your major job hubs in Perth. You'll see here Osborne Park and Joondalup. Duncraig's sort of probably about I'd say it's probably about 30% of the way north of Osborne Park, sort of towards the coast a little bit. That's where Duncraig is. I probably should have circled it, but I didn't in this example. So Duncraig's obviously close to Osborne Park, not far from Joondalup either, close to Nedlands, close to the CBD. It's close to all the good jobs in the lifestyle area. So that's a good example as to what a suburb that would do very well. People that would live in Duncraig don't generally have to go very far to work, and if at most probably half an hour, and that would probably be even in bad traffic. I mean, so like that's a good example of somewhere where, you have good proximity to high paying jobs, that in Duncraig in Perth. That's point number 4.